Hello, friends, and welcome to the latest edition of our Listener Stories compilation. These are stories sent in by you of true, personal, paranormal, or supernatural experiences. Many of these are frightening and have never been told to even friends or family. We thank everyone for sharing your stories with us, and will continue to provide this platform as a way for you to get your story out there. And now, on to the stories. Paranormal encounter. From a young age, I've always seemed to have seen things others cannot, so encounters like this weren't too strange for me. Usually, I'd tell family and friends about specific entities I'd seen or things I'd heard. It was often just brushed off as having an active imagination. This time was slightly different. I was with my boyfriend at the time, who was now an ex, not long before the pandemic. My grandmother on my dad's side had been suffering with dementia for the previous few years. I was never close with her, as she was very strange and quite a mean woman. She would often lie, tell wildly inaccurate stories, and be very insulting, but she was my grandmother, and I did love her. Towards the end, she had stopped talking and being able to walk or do anything at all, resorting back to an infant-like state. No family would visit her when she had to go into nursing care, only me, my dad, and mother, who she really didn't like. In early January of 2020, she had been in the hospital, and we were informed by doctors that she most likely wouldn't live longer than a couple more months, and that she would be more comfortable living in a palliative care facility. One day, I'd went to visit her with my boyfriend, and it felt like an invasion of privacy, as she lay in her bed, seemingly unaware we were even in the room. I'd went over to the bedside and spoke to her to let her know I was there, but she had a blank stare on her face, with her mouth slightly open. We left not long after, not knowing it would be the last time we would see her alive. On the evening of St. Patrick's Day, my boyfriend and I were on our way out shopping when I had been given the call that she had passed away. I was expecting this news, and it didn't really hit me until the funeral, where I finally cried. Before the funeral, I'd visited her in the funeral parlor, and her face looked shockingly distorted. I'm actually planning on working in the funeral industry myself, so I've done some training and have an interest in true crime and other subjects surrounding this, but she looked different to anyone I'd ever seen post-mortem. Her face looked very odd, and the image was planted in my mind for a while afterwards. Although that was her body, I knew she was no longer there. The funeral had been and passed. I was in bed with my boyfriend. I'd woken up early in the morning around 4 a.m., which is very unusual for me. And when I'd looked over, he was awake and looking distressed. He also was not an early riser, so this was strange. As soon as I come around properly, I blurted out that I'd just had the strangest dream, and went on to explain what had happened in it, but before I could even finish my sentence, he had finished it for me. Your Nan was in the doorway, and then next to the bed. We were both speechless. And he then went on to say that was not a dream. He was a very skeptical person. He did not believe in any sort of paranormal or unexplainable phenomena. We discussed what we'd both seen. Then we were too terrified to go back to sleep. From what we could both recall, we do not remember waking or this event happening before we went to sleep. So the timeline of events was a blur, apart from us assuming that we had just seen the same thing together at the same time. He told me that he had sort of become aware, with no memory of waking from sleep, just aware that he sat up in the bed. In the doorway of the ensuite bathroom stood my grandmother in a nightdress. As I'm scared of the dark, I keep that door ajar with the bathroom light on and my bedroom one off. The lighting cast a dark shadow over my grandmother's silhouette. My ex explained that he was frozen in fear when he realized what was happening and turned to wake me, but I was already sat up looking. He said I was in a trance-like state and simply said, "It's just my Nan. She'll go now." Then her silhouette disappeared. As quickly as she had disappeared, she had reappeared next to the bed, peering over us. We were unable to see her features as the source of light was from the bathroom behind her now. I then snapped out of it and said, "I've just had the strangest dream." So back to the beginning of our tale. After that, she was gone. We never saw her again, and that early morning we sat up with all the lights on, terrified that we had both just experienced the same strangeness. After that, he started to question his beliefs on spirits and ghosts. We couldn't figure out if it was some sort of a coincidental joint dream or a look at the afterlife. We no longer speak as we split a few months later, but this is one memory that I can guarantee still spooks him to this day. Signed, Rhiannon. My strange encounter with an invisible entity. Hi, Steve. I really enjoy your channel and all the content. Here's my strange encounter with an invisible entity. All I ask is if you're going to narrate my story, please just let me know. I'm originally from western North Carolina, near the Blue Ridge Parkway, from a small community called McGrady. After college, I relocated to Charleston, South Carolina. I grew up hunting and fishing in the great outdoors. My dad was a lifelong hunter and sportsman, so much so that he was a self-employed taxidermist for over 30 years until he retired. I'm currently 40, so this story happened to me over 20 years ago, when I was around the age of 16. I was out in the woods hunting white-tailed deer in the autumn, when the season is open for harvesting. It was a sunny and beautiful day in the western North Carolina mountains. Suddenly, out of nowhere, I heard a strange and bizarre noise, like a clicking sound. I began scanning the area and investigating some trees down in the woods directly in front of where I was standing. However, I could not find anything strange or out of place. Then, suddenly, I could hear leaves moving in the trees. I started looking up in that direction at the tops of the trees and at the branches. I had very good vision without any need for glasses, contacts, or corrective vision surgery. I'd never experimented with drugs, legal or illegal, and I did not drink alcohol, as I was raised in a strict Southern Baptist household. I saw something in the tree limbs. The best way I could describe it was like the creature in the movie Predator, where the invisible being appears. I could see the outline of it, and at the same time, you could see through it. It was up in the tops of the trees, just staring right back at me, making a clicking sound. I was terrified. Being a young man from the mountains in nowhere, North Carolina, I could not believe my eyes. This being was as tall as myself, if not larger. I stood there, paralyzed with fear and pure terror. As I stared at it, and finally my fear transformed into curiosity, and I was carrying my dad's hunting rifle, a Savage Model 99, I decided to try to get closer to take a shot at whatever this thing was. I began moving closer to this thing to get a shot at it. I took a shot at the creature, however, unfortunately, I missed. The thing took off running, and it began moving across the tree branches. It moved with incredible speed. It was amazingly fast. I don't know how it was moving as fast as it was from tree to tree. I know what I saw, and I know what I did to try to harvest whatever it was. I've thought so many times how things might have changed forever if only I had not been so nervous and shaky and missed the shot I took with my Savage Model 99 hunting rifle. After the creature ran into the wilderness and I lost sight of it, I began to reflect on the day's events. I thought, what in the F are you doing approaching and trying to harvest this thing, which I had no idea what it was and also if it was a threat or not. It scared the F out of me. I know that. I never ever told anybody about my encounter with the creature because I knew people would think I was batshit crazy. Well, that is my story. I thank you for providing a platform for me to share my strange and bizarre encounter with an invisible entity. Stay safe out there in the wilderness. Signed, Billy. Little People Encounters. I recently found your channel on YouTube and have, like many other people, binge watched your uploads. While several of the subjects interest me, I've gravitated more toward your Fae series out of curiosity. What follows is an encounter I had in the spring of 2012 while traveling through Oregon. After driving nonstop for many hours and still about halfway to my destination, I decided to stay at an upcoming campground to rest for the night. It was located on a heavily wooded mountain next to a lake and appeared to only have a few people staying there in RVs. Piles of snow were here and there, and the temperature felt like it was in the 40s. Sleepy and cold, I still felt very comfortable there. While putting up my tent, I thought how nice it would be to fall asleep in those woods while it was raining on my tent. About the time I was almost done adding the tent fly, I felt a few sprinkles. I finished up, climbed into my tent. I then got comfortable, and in my thoughts, invited the Sasquatch people to come visit me while I was there. I'll explain this in a moment. I then dozed off as it began to rain more heavily. At some point, I was awakened by someone behind me poking my right shoulder. It was like a small child poking their sleeping parent to wake up. I was lying on my left side at the time, and I remember being so tired and my eyes were so heavy it hurt to open them. I didn't want to get up, so using my thoughts, told them I was really sorry, but I was just so tired, and thanked them for coming to visit me anyway. That's when the being behind me started to tug on my shoulder to get me to roll over onto my back. I remember the feeling, and that it seemed to be like a small child, not an adult, as they tugged a few times before they finally got me rolled over. Once I was on my back, they climbed on top of me and sat on my stomach. That's when I decided to open my eyes. I was still so tired, I could only manage to open them a crack. That's when I saw them, and to my surprise, it wasn't a Sasquatch like I thought. It was a little person, probably between 18 to 24 inches tall. They had long blonde or silver hair and gray or olive green skin, and I remember noticing how thin their arms were. They were a little larger than a 25-cent quarter. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a second little person to my left. This second being seemed more interested in my dehydrated banana slices and pineapple snacks. I watched as they took a piece and ate it. Apparently not a threat. That's when I just relaxed and went back to sleep. When I awoke, they were both gone. So, briefly getting back to my invitation for Sasquatch people to come visit me, I realize it sounds strange that someone would actually do such a thing, especially when many people go missing and are afraid of them. Over the years, I've had so many unusual yet friendly experiences with Sasquatch and other beings that they've sort of become usual for me. During this particular road trip and at each overnight stop, I invited them to visit, and in every instance but this one, they appeared. This is also the only time I've ever seen little people. If you share this story with your audience, I hope they enjoy it. I may share more of my experiences in the future. Kindly, signed, Todd. Stories about the house I grew up in. Hi, I wanted to share some stories about the house I grew up in. They all happened in the late 1990s and early 2000s. I live in southeast Tennessee. The first story I want to share is what my family calls the heavy footsteps story. Growing up, we had a den area in our unfinished basement. We had an old couch, a TV, and that's where we had our new gateway computer. One day, my mom, two brothers, sister, and me were all downstairs. Us kids were watching TV, and my mom was on the computer. As we're sitting there, we start to hear loud footsteps, like someone wearing work boots, walking down the hall upstairs. The hallway runs the length of the house. On one end are the bedrooms, and the other is the kitchen. My dad worked out of town on power lines, so my mom thought he had gotten home early this week. She called him and said, "I didn't know you were coming home early." He responded and said, "Honey, I'm in." I don't remember exactly where he was, but it was a few hours away. She told him there were footsteps upstairs. This has all happened in just a few seconds, and the footsteps are going down the hall. I grab a baseball bat to head up the stairs to see who it was. I was only 8 or so. The door to the basement is in the kitchen, and the footsteps were coming from the other end of the house. By the time I got to the top of the stairs, whoever or whatever it was should have been at about the door based on the footsteps. I cracked open the door and didn't see anything. I opened the door completely and no one was there. We still don't know what it was. The next story happened in the basement. My younger brother, who was about 3 at the time, was in the basement watching TV alone. He came upstairs asking who was calling for Chris. My mom said nobody was calling for Chris. Nobody in our family is named Chris. He went back downstairs to watch TV again. He came back up asking again who was calling for Chris. At this point, my mom goes to my sister's room to ask her and my cousin if they were playing a trick on him. They said no, they'd been in her room the whole time. She also came and asked me the same thing. I had also been in my room. My mom didn't think anything of it. She was on the phone with my dad later, who was working out of town, and told him what happened. He said, "Wait, did you say Chris?" And my mom said, "Yeah, why?" He then went on to tell her that the older couple who had lived in the house before us, before they died, had a grandson named Chris. That really freaked her out. The next story happened upstairs. The way my sister and parents' rooms were positioned, their closet walls were back to back. My sister got up one night and told my mom someone was in her closet. My mom thought she was just being a paranoid 5-year-old, so she told her to go back to bed. A few minutes later, my sister came back and told her again someone was in her closet. This time, my mom went back to my sister's room with her and showed her that there was no one there and put her back in bed. A few minutes later, my sister got up again, saying there really was someone in there. At this point, my mom was about to go to bed, so she told my sister that she could just sleep with her. A few minutes later, they're about to head to my mom's room. My mom's bedroom light is on, and she sees a shadow moving around of someone or something in the hall coming from her room. She yells at my brothers and tells them they need to go to bed. They respond and say that they are in bed. She opens their door, and there they are in their bunk bed. She then yells and tells me to go to bed, but I was also in my room. She then gets really scared, makes up a story and says, "Kids, I think we left some groceries in the van. Come help me get them." And she rushes out the door to the van. My papa comes over with his revolver and goes through the house checking to see if someone is there. No one was in the house. The next story, I was the only one involved. I woke up one night to go to the bathroom. As I was leaving the bathroom, I looked down the hall and saw red glowing eyes staring at me. My brother's room was across the hall from the bathroom, so I ran in there. I looked at the window, and the same red glowing eyes were staring at me through the window. I then ran back to my room and hid under the blanket for the rest of the night, unable to sleep. The last story also happened to me. One evening, after it had gotten dark, my mom asked me to go out to the van to get something. As I'm out there, I felt like something was watching me. So I got in the van, closed the door, and looked around into the darkness. I didn't see anything, so I grabbed what my mom had asked me to get and went to get out. As I'm about to shut the sliding door, I still feel like something is watching me. And then I heard something. I turn around and look out into the backyard and see a huge black mass moving towards or running at me extremely fast. I panicked and ran as fast as I could back into the house. I came in so fast that it freaked my mom out and she yelled, "What happened?" My dad was home this time and I told him and my mom what happened. She told my dad to look at me, that I was pale and white as a ghost. My heart was also racing. He got his gun and went outside to look around, but didn't see anything, or at least he never admitted that he saw anything. This is the story that freaks me out the most. I actually got chills and goosebumps for writing this one down, even though it happened over 20 years ago. There are many other little things that also happened in the house, like things being moved or cabinet doors being opened. My family also has their own stories of things that have happened to them individually. Multiple people have said they can feel something in the house. My mom passed away a couple years ago, and my dad has remarried and moved out of the house. But my younger brother and his wife are buying the house from him. I have noticed, interestingly, that since us kids have gotten older and become adults, that the strange occurrences have pretty much stopped. The only thing that's happened recently is that my sister and her son were living with my parents 2 or 3 years ago, and my nephew would randomly look down the hall, smile, wave, and say hi when no one was there. He was about 1 at the time. I will be interested to see if things start up again when my brother and his wife have kids. People can be skeptical all they want, but after my family's and my experiences, I 100% believe in the paranormal. Signed, thanks, John. Strange occurrence that happened to me. Hi, Steve. I hope you and yours are very well. I would like to share a strange event that happened to me about 5 years ago. I've been wanting to send it in to you for a long time and finally felt ready to share it. I'm happy for you to include it in any broadcast or publication of yours at any time if you so wish. I take great pleasure in walking my best friend's Labrador when I can. As I work nearby to where she lives, it's easy for me to pop by on a break and take him to the local woods. On this particular day, it was just a normal routine visit. I had 2 hours before my next shift. I work at the local hospital and often do split shifts, and it's not worth me going home, so I fill my time by taking my friend's lovely dog for a stroll, and I love being outdoors as much as possible. The local dog walking spot is a 4-acre site, all wooded, and it's like an island. One road to it. To the east is a lane leading to private houses with a stream. In America, I think you call it a creek, between the woods and the lane. To the north is another track that leads to 2 houses. To the west is a field. The entrance to the woods is on the south, and the only other exit is on the north side that leads to the 2 houses. If one is in the woods by the main entrance, there is no option but to just follow the track that snakes around the woods and leads you back to where you started. These tracks are very wide and clear, but would be very difficult to go off. But on this day, I suddenly ended up, with the dog, in a part that I did not recognize. No track, and in a bramble bush. When I worked my way out, I found myself in the back garden of a house I was not familiar with. The lady who lived there came out to ask me why I was in her garden, and I explained that I had no idea, and she could see that I was very confused and bewildered, and was very sweet and kind and directed me back to the car park by the woods, which turned out to be 1.5 miles away. To get to her garden, I would have had to cross the stream. One minute I was walking a daily, sometimes twice daily route, and somehow ended up 1.5 miles away across the water that I had no recollection of. When I returned with the dog, it turned out that I had been gone 4 hours, and I was late for my shift. I didn't get into trouble because I'd never been late before. They were just worried about me because my mobile phone just did a blank beep. It didn't ring or go to answer phone. This has always bothered me, and I have no explanation for it. Thank you for taking the time to read my event. I believe in the strange and unusual, but never thought anything would ever happen to me. Signed, kindest regards, and God bless, Vicky. Small blue humanoid. Hi. I have an experience I want to share that I've never shared publicly. I feel like the criticism I would experience keeps me from sharing this story. But here it is. When I was a young child, maybe 7 years old, I was visiting my father for our routine weekend overnights since my mom and dad were divorced at this point. My father was renting a unit in a duplex in Spokane, Washington. Tonight was my night to sleep in the middle of the bed since my brother, me, and my father all shared one large bed. From where I was situated in the bed, I could see out into the kitchen where a dimly lit overhead light was always kept on. It shone over the sink. One night, I woke up for some unknown reason. I sat up in bed, nestled between my brother and my father. I looked into the kitchen, which was illuminated by the dim light over the sink. I saw a small blue figure, much like the ones animated in alien horror movies. It was filling up a cup of water. I recognized the cup as one from our cupboard. It was a pale blue plastic cup that was designated for my brother and I, since glass cups were for the adults. I stared at the blue figure as it used the sink to fill the cup with water. I remember being perplexed because I could not hear the sound of the faucet. That really struck me as abnormal, and it will always stick in my mind as the most peculiar thing, since I could see the water flowing into the blue plastic cup. I watched the figure for a few moments until it turned to face me. I was overcome with horror as I peered into its huge, dark black eyes staring back at me. I threw the blankets over my head in terror. I tried waking my father, but he just grumbled and turned away, so I remained there, petrified and confused. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I remember is waking up in bed with the covers over my head. I peeked over the edge of the blankets into the kitchen where I'd seen the blue being, but nothing was there. To this day, I still wonder who this thing was and why it was getting water. If anyone has any insight, please reach out. I see UFOs and have strange dreams since then. I'm hoping for answers or shared experiences, please. Signed, sincerely, Lux. My really odd experience. Hi, Steve. I had a really odd experience just over a week ago that might interest you to use on your site. So, I took a walk up to a nearby shop. This takes me alongside a busy road with 4 lanes of traffic going one way only. On the opposite side of the road to where I am, there's just a long fence with a park on the other side of it. There is no entry to the park along that part of the road, so there really is nowhere worth crossing over for. There were a good few people coming and going on the same side of the road that I was on. I'm walking, going through what I need to buy in my mind and not taking in much around me. Suddenly, and for no real reason, I noticed a young guy, about mid-20s, ahead. There were mums with pushchairs, old folk, and so on walking around him, going their own way. I have no idea why he caught my eye, but as soon as I noticed him, my mind told me he was not human. I have no idea why I had this sudden thought, and was shocked by it. Now, apart from that glance, I didn't look at him again as he approached, though I could see where he was through the corner of my eye. A few steps away in front of me, he stopped, turned to the curb, and looked as though he was going to cross the road. But instead of crossing, he turned his face directly towards me and, well, did a weird movement of stepping toward the curb and then taking a couple steps backwards, and then back forward to the curb again with his face turned to me, not anyone else. He made a sort of dance of it. He stopped this odd behavior and continued to walk toward me to go past in the opposite direction. As he passed me, he looked straight into my face. At that point, I was making eye contact. His face was waxy looking, like major plastic surgery had made it tight and shiny. His eyes were intense and blue that did not seem natural, like a mannequin. Well, he passed by, and I laughed to myself in my mind, telling myself that I probably had guessed right, and he heard me think it. It seemed like that. As though he was blatantly showing me he was not human, but had everyone else fooled. It seemed kind of funny to me then. Yes, I thought I was just being a crazy old lady. I reached the supermarket, got myself a shopping trolley, and headed in. But suddenly, someone came from behind and shot in past me at speed. It was him. He went to a cooler fridge with a glass door just ahead of me. He opened the door and stood with it wide open. As he stood against it, he stared straight at me through it. He had a weird smirk to his mouth, though no other part of his face moved. Like wax. I got closer and about to pass him. He slammed the fridge door shut and took off to a veggie stand and just stood there. I went stealth, totally lost him. Didn't see him after that. Heading home, I was nervous that he might follow me, but glad to say I don't think he did. I'm old and certainly not wealthy looking. The only interest he could have had in me is that he knew what I had thought. I know this is very crazy sounding, but it was all so odd. And why would I have that thought anyway? People don't interest me much, and I was preoccupied with what I had to buy. Could it have been instinct? Pity there hadn't been a dog around at the time. I would have been interested in how it would react to him. Thank you for your time, Steve. Anyone have any sensible thoughts as to what happened? Signed, Ren. Well, friends, that's it. What a great collection of strange encounters. Let us know what you think about these personal stories in the comments below, but please be respectful of the storytellers and the opinions of others. Also, if you have any strange stories you would like to see featured in an upcoming video, by all means, please email them to nationalparkmysteriesYT@gmail.com. Meanwhile, be good to yourselves and each other. I'm Steve Stockton, and I'll talk to you next time.